So I did another lesson in this series about blues chord substitutions to take you from the 1 chord to the 4 chord, basically the first 4 bars of the blues. And someone left a comment on that about, well, what about the next 4 bars? And as far as I'm concerned, one person is a groundswell, so I'm going to cover that now. We're going to talk about how to play the middle 4 bars of the blues chord progression, getting from the 4 chord back to the 1 chord with some cool substitute chords. So, talking about if you've got the first 4 bars, 1 to 4, here we are at bar 5 of the blues. We're about to go from the 4 chord. In its most basic form, you'd have 2 bars of 4 and back to 2 bars of 1. But that's not what we're going to do. We're going to use some chord voicings that are swiped from the playing of Freddie Green, the great rhythm guitar player with Count Basie, and just that swing era in general, and apply them to playing fingerstyle blues and look at some of the reasons why those voicings work, which will help you to use them in a way that sounds good and has some kind of melodic and harmonic purpose. So here we go. For the 4 chord, we could be down here on a A7 chord, or we could use a chord voicing like this, which is basically this chord voicing with the root, flat 7, and 3 on the 6th string, 4th string, and 3rd string. That's the swing chord voicing. If you're playing fingerstyle, there's no reason not to grab the root on the open A7, on the open A string. And you could also grab the high string. That can ring out, that can be part of your melody. So if we're starting from here, one way to get from the 4 back to the 1 is like that. And I'm going from the 4 to the sharp 4 diminished, and then I'm resolving it to E7 with the 5th in the bass. And so I've got my A7 I just explained. Then here's A sharp diminished. I've got A sharp in the bass, 6th fret on the low string, and I'm keeping these 2 notes. Here's the 5th fret on the 4th string and the 6th fret on the 3rd string. So from here to here, and then just taking that whole thing and sliding it up 1 fret, there's an E7 with the B in the bass, or the 5th in the bass. Here's the 5th and the 3rd and the flat 7. I'm keeping a steady bass. And then from here, I might finish out by, because here's my 2 bars of A, and now I'm back to E. That's how I might get to B, to the beginning of the last line. And what I've done is gone from E to back to A, which is the 4, so that's still in the key, back to E with an E with a G sharp in the bass. So the 3rd in the bass. Here's the 3rd, here's the root, and here's the 5th. And then you could think of this a bunch of ways. It looks like a G diminished chord with the root and the diminished 7th and the flat 3rd. You could also look at it as a C7 with the 5th in the bass, half stepping onto B7, or you could look at it as a an F sharp 7 with the flat 9 in the bass, which is a tritone substitution for C7, which is the 5 of B7. So you could look at it as a kind of 5 of 5 if you wanted to. So here's A sharp diminished to E, to A, to E, to whatever this is, to the 5 chord. And the reason you can do this is because these notes here, in conjunction with the E is staying constant, right? This is implying this 4-note diminished chord. So there's an E on top. And the E is staying constant while these notes are resolving up by half step, which is a strong kind of resolution for any note. And even this note, the 7th, or actually in this case it's the, oh, what the heck is it? Let's not even worry about it. It's also going up by a half step. So these three are all resolving up by a half step, which you could look at as a guitar player and go, oh, it's a half step resolution. That's what chords do in my world, and that'd be true too. If you do it down here, this may be a more familiar way to play diminished. Here's an A7 chord, and here's putting in A sharp on the bottom to make it an A sharp diminished. You can also hear that this could also go down. So you'd have this, and the symphonic cats call that contrary motion, and that's also strong and effective. So that's why you can resolve upwards like that. Now there's another kind of diminished sound you can use, or another kind of transitional sound. From A here, you could go here, and then from there to here. And so what's happening there is we've got A7. And then here's, you could look at this a bunch of ways. You could look at this as A diminished. Or just looking at these three notes, you could look at it as A minor 6. And that would be the same as like when you hear a Beatles song going. Or you could say, oh, well, that's a diminished chord. And it's that diminished chord, because diminished chords move by minor third all around the neck. And so if this is the same as this, then this is basically a B7 chord, a 5 chord with the 5th in the bass. And so this is now going A to B7 with terrible voice leading, but that's what's happening. You're going from A7 to B7 to E, which is just adding in a B7 to get you back to the E chord where you didn't ordinarily have one. So this is a way of going from from 4 sort of to 5 to 1. That's another way to think about it. But once you get from here to here, this sound resolves nicely to this E chord, which is an E with a G sharp in the bass. So here's the 3rd and the root and the 5th of E. So and then from here, just continuing those, we've got a little more E ground to cover. So here's E, and now we're just doing this to this to this, and we already went over, this is kind of, there's a few different ways you can look at this, but it's a passing chord that takes you to B7, which takes you to E. So we're just killing time on E by throwing in a little extra 5 of 5 of 1. So when I'm doing this, steady bass, grabbing the chord with my index and middle, grabbing the high string when I can, and then here, just getting a little melody action going with the open B string, high string. So that's another way, that's a second way to get from 4 back to 1. And so you could do this even if you don't have to play these kind of chord substitutions the whole way through a tune. You could start off or you could put the other version in. So you can kind of go from uptown to downtown and back however you want once you start to have some of these voicings under your fingers. So that's two ways to get from 4 to 1, both of them using some kind of diminished chord sound. So try playing around with that and see what you can do with it. Hope you have some fun working on some of these voicings. If you've got any questions or comments, leave them for me down below. I would love to hear from you, and I'll see you next time.